On the evening of March 13th, 2022, I arrived at the Big Bend National Park. I would be meeting my friend the following day at the Panther Junction Visitor Center, at which point we would embark on our journey to the Big Bend Ranch State Park. In the meantime, I decided to enjoy the nighttime photos capability of my new mobile device. After daybreak, we began our journey on FM 170 towards the Big Bend Ranch State Park, and we got to see kayakers, rafters, and canoers from the Big Hill overlook. We had visitors almost immediately after arriving at our campgrounds, where we set up our campsites for the following nights. After setting up our sleeping quarters, we were visited by another native from the Big Bend Desert region. On Tuesday, March the 15th, we started out our day at a nearby trail system known as Cinco Tinajas. Cinco Tinajas provided a beautiful landscape view and quite a number of opportunities for viewing some of the early wildflowers that were beginning to emerge for this year's springtime. Walking in the dry desert wash was quite a bit like walking on a beach. So every so often we would take advantage of the shade of the cottonwood trees to enjoy the beauty of the bluebonnets. In addition to the beautiful bluebonnets, we would occasionally notice some interesting insects on the nearby trees, and almost always there would be bird nests in the nearby vegetation as well. While we marveled at the variety of plants that were thriving under this soon-to-be scorching summertime sun, we also gave thanks for finding water in abundance in some of the most unusual locations. We continued exploring the Cinco Tinajas area for vegetation and other signs of life, and after a quick overlook stop, we returned to our campsite for a snack before resuming our day's hikes. During our afternoon hike, we found evidence of water transport, some dried mushrooms, and also a not-so-dry wash that had been dammed up formerly.
Oh yeah, many animals come here. I bet. It's a pretty area.
While ranchers formerly watered their livestock with this water, we noticed that squirrels and other animals probably take advantage of this watering hole regularly.
They go up high. Yeah. They're gone. Almost.
As dry as much of the desert vegetation was, we gave thanks that there were watering holes throughout the desert, and we returned to our campsite to prepare for another evening under the stars. On March 16th, we headed towards the Burnt Camp trailhead, and we took on the right-hand shut-up side of the trail system. Along the way, we stopped for a number of photo opportunities, which included some of the most unusual cactus that we'd seen yet. Once we arrived at the trail system, we quickly began our hike as the off-road driving had taken up a considerable amount of our daylight hours. Check out my friend standing next to this giant desert sotol. How amazing! As we descended further and further into these desert wash systems, we found that more and more water was collecting, which was increasing the likelihood of us finding little cactus blooms and flowers along the way.
I see one. As you said. As you said. You're so cool.
I know.
Look at this. I got it. Wow, such a nice. Oh, can we do that? Yeah. Oh, look at this formation.
I'm having trouble focusing. There were so many beautiful blooms and insects thriving in this oasis in the desert. Although we did not find any standing water on this trail system, we did continue on as far as the daylight would permit us to, and we did find a couple of creatures that were enjoying the narrow slot canyons and the shade and the habitat that provided them with their comfort. Check out this amazing large lizard that stayed put for just long enough to take a photograph with us. Later, we poured out a little bit of water for some wasps that appeared to be thirsty. On our walk back, we enjoyed the beautiful scenery, and we also found evidence of prior ranching efforts in the form of troughs and buckets, and we also found some old, new rubbish in the form of aluminum cans with pull tabs in a design we hadn't seen in a long time. We arrived back at our campsite with just enough time to enjoy dinner before winding down with a beautiful West Texas sunset. After the sun had set, I decided to take a few more nighttime photos using my new mobile device. It sure is able to capture some of the nighttime scenes quite beautifully. Don't you agree? On March 17th, after warming up, we decided to head towards the Crawford Smith house, but our first stop along the way would be Manos Arriba, a rock shelter with pictographs.
I want to take
We took a number of photographs of the amazing handprints that were located throughout this rock shelter, and we heard the lonely cries of a single scaled quail that was calling out, possibly looking for its family or for a mate. Either way, after photographing the rock shelter, we moved to the other side of the wash where we photographed a variety of unique plants, and we continued snapping pictures of the wildflowers as we continued to approach towards the sound of the lone scaled quail. Although we never got close enough to photograph the quail, we sure were treated to such a unique and amazing hike. Some of the slick rock formations here reminded me a lot of the McKinney Springs area of the Big Bend National Park. With so much unique vegetation and with so many unique landscape features, I could only wonder at how many unique animals would be visiting during a thriving season. We continued our journey towards the Crawford Smith house as the wind speeds increased. And every so often we'd find a gigantic cactus, none of which were fruiting.
By now it should have.
The cactus came in such a variety of colors, from fuchsias to magentas to greens to yellows, and on and on. The closer that we got to the Crawford Smith house, the more vegetation that we saw. This is because there was an active spring flowing from somewhere up in the mountains, which not only caused the cottonwood trees to grow strong, but also the bluebonnets. After exploring the mountain springs, we explored the Crawford Smith House, which is the largest set of ruins that I've seen in the entire Big Bend region.
Yeah, shower room. When they abandoned this, why they didn't carry all this stuff?
I don't know. I'll have to ask at the, maybe they know at the visitor center a little bit more. Or maybe we can look online and they'll tell more story about this family.
If I move, I will clean up as much as I can.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this footstool or something. Look. Peach.
Yes.
Look at. They have the peach tree.
Wow.
Oh.
Javelina.
Hello. Look at the structure inside. They put all this stuff. Maybe mud. See, this is mud.
All throughout the Crawford Smith Ranch were details that were fascinating. Even the columns were adorned with gems and fossils. Even reviewing the footage of this location after the fact, it was quite impossible to put into words the perspective of just how large these ruins are. Just like with the wildlife and vegetation that exists in this area, it's quite apparent that the success of this location has a lot to do with the neighboring mountain springs that come from just across the wash. Every so often we noticed thickets of bluebonnets as we made our way back up the Fresno Canyon Road. And what a road it was. Check out this stretch of unusual road. Although the day remained windy, we still made time to stop along the way for additional flowers and washes that were interesting, or at least looked like they would prove to be interesting when we started exploring them. Just like the lone quail, I found a lone millipede, which is sometimes something that we find by the hundreds all over the park. While looking up down, and all around, we were quite challenged in terms of finding evidence of desert life, although every so often we got really lucky.
Hurry!
Already experiencing more than we imagined we would, we decided to make our way back to the campground so we could make it before nightfall.
Yeah, many cactus and they are suffering from lack of water.
We got back just in time to see some backpackers heading off into the distance to experience their own version of isolation, as we experienced isolation in our empty campground area. Once again, the cold desert evening greeted us, and I took a few pictures as the night advanced, not knowing what would greet us the following morning in that beautiful oasis. When the Raven greeted us on March the 18th, it was barely 40 degrees outside, so we took a quick desert hike to warm up, and we found the only desert cactus flower that we found in bloom for the entire trip, a desert claret cup. After using the water refilling station at the nearby visitor center, we drove to an unknown wash and explored it in both directions for as far as we could. We explored and took photos to our heart's content, and we enjoyed the sights and sounds of the desert, which included singing birds nearby. From one spot, we could even see the Chizos Mountains of the Big Bend National Park. Although widely uninhabited by humanity, it became more and more apparent that the area was in fact visited regularly by our human counterparts from the major cities. We returned early to strike camp so that we could leave early the following morning. Our neighbors who had gone backpacking the night before had also returned early for the day. After making sure my sleeping quarters was arranged, I made my way out into the desert to collect a shining object that I had seen way off in the distance. After removing the errant balloon from the desert landscape, I returned to the campground to enjoy the final evening that we would be spending in that location. I took several pictures of the area to help relay how it looks at these campgrounds, and I really did my best to capture the beautiful sunset that was unfolding just for us. Look at the fire in those clouds. After sunset, I mapped out the rest of my journey, noting the clear weather along the way. I wrote several letters using a camp lantern, and I noticed that my friend had their lantern on as well as they prepared for the next day's trip. On our 6 a.m. drive out of the park, we noticed the first jackrabbits we'd seen.
Quite impatient, said you gotta choose. It's only your spirit that you're gonna lose. My time ran out quickly, I couldn't believe that what I had said I didn't deceive. Have you decided where you wanna go? I said to the devil, I'm staying right here. It's probably better got angry and struck at my head. If I hadn't moved, I'd surely be dead. Have you decided where you want to go? Ooh yeah! You better believe the devil is tricky, he's dealing in harm. To show up his beauty is part of her charm. Have you decided where you want to go? Have you decided? Do you even know?
After fueling up and enjoying some of the local sights of Presidio, we enjoyed breakfast, and then we parted ways after our trip that was already almost 3 years in the making to the Big Bend Ranch State Park. Till next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.